Let's get into this discussion now. Amnesty International South Africa has launched the hashtag Scan the Scar campaign. This is in an effort to raise awareness on child and teenage pregnancy. Data from Statistics South Africa showing that 105,000 girls between the ages 10 and 19 gave birth between April 2022 and March 2023. Basic Education Department Learner Pregnancy Prevention and Management Deputy Director Busisa Nokama joins me in studio, and alongside her is Teddy Bear Clinic's Dr. Shaheda Omar, who joins us via the virtual platform. To both of you ladies, thank you very much for your time. And I'd like to start in studio, Ms. Nokama. Those statistics, they shock us into reality. 105,000 girls between the ages 10 and 19 gave birth in South Africa. As a department, how do you make sense of this?
It's quite difficult. As you introduced the topic, you were talking about child and teenage pregnancy. How do you bring about a discussion about a 10-year-old that is pregnant? How do they become pregnant to start with? Because remember, these children are not in an age group that should even be consenting for sexual activity. So, you know, when you look at the research that is being conducted, you'd actually see that education is a protective factor. And now this pregnancy continues to undermine our efforts as a department. So for us, we are not taking the issue of teenage pregnancy or child pregnancy lightly, because you are definitely saying to me, as much as you're talking statistics, but you are saying our children are being raped.
Yeah.
And what are we doing about it? That is, in a nutshell, how we look at it as a department.
Indeed. Statutory rape is one of the topics we're certainly going to explore. Let's bring Dr. Shaheda Omar, who is on the virtual platform, to this discussion. Dr. Omar, good evening to you, and thank you once again for joining us, as you usually do on this show. The consequences of teenage pregnancy, perhaps let's term it the way that it has been done now. It's not teenage pregnancy, it's now child and teenage pregnancy. What is the impact of that?
Well, I think firstly, we just need to think about this image, a child birthing a child. Can we actually even begin to conceptualize that? A child who should be playing, skipping, hopping, jumping, laughing, and that child has to go through the process, the emotional trauma, the psychological trauma, not being in a position to process this, not being in a position to even look beyond this pregnancy and the life ahead of this pregnancy. If we look at the consequences, firstly, the impact on the child attending school, how it affects the child in her performance, the humiliation, the stigma, the social responses to that, but the physiological responses of the body not being able to comprehend the changes, the hormonal changes that she will have to endure through this pregnancy. The loss of time, in education, because visiting clinics for antenatal, if the pregnancy is continued, there are many challenges, rejection and anger by family members. We've seen a lot of the groups, the support groups that we are currently working with, a lot of the young girls are expressing this feelings of rejection by family members, the lack of support. One can understand that, but one must also begin to appreciate the challenges and the trauma a young girl goes through this, a child birthing a child. I just want to emphasize that the unintended consequences, the lack of opportunities in the long term, where some girls continue their schooling, others do not. We've seen girls that have been victims of rape, the statutory rape scenario, and they've come in for court preparation. A 13-year-old bringing a baby, the baby suckling on her breast, and she's coming for court preparation in order to prepare to testify in court. These are the challenges that our children are faced with. And it's something that we cannot condone, we cannot allow. We have to take more action, more swift, immediate, and urgent responses need to be implemented.
Before I come back to studio, Dr. Omar, that image that you have sought to paint with the words, a child birthing a child, the understanding is that this also poses a health risk for both mother and child. Just explain that to us a little bit.
So indeed, if we're looking at mortality, looking at pregnancy complications, premature birth, there are so many other medical complications that both the mother and the newborn are likely to experience and would be subjected to. So I think one needs to factor the health implications and well-being of both mother and baby.
Ms. Nokama, let's come back to you. The other element here is that when these children give birth to children, to their babies, it has a ripple effect of recycling the scourge of poverty, and they sometimes are forced to drop out of school because of nasty comments. It could either be in school or within the community. My assumption is that you monitor this. What is the impact of this? Where do these children end up?
To tell you the truth, these children end up out of school, not because of only the fact that they could not keep up with academic performance, but also from the reception that is coming from communities. Because they often come to us and say that I couldn't come back to school because I had no one to look after my child. As soon as I was pregnant, my mother said, and my parents or guardians said, you are an adult now, you have a child, take care of your child. And that alone, it's actually a continuation of pregnancy, because if we have them back in the sector, because in terms of the policy that we have, we mitigate the impact of pregnancy through ensuring that we retain our learners in school, because in order to address the issues of poverty that you're talking about, they need to be educated. They need to get to a position where they can provide for their own children. And in terms of research, you'd also find that when these children give birth at a young age, it increases the likelihood of them having more children, their children actually having children at that particular age. And at the same time, research is showing that where parents are not educated, then the children within those households are more likely to be pregnant. So what are we doing if we can't bring them back to our schooling environment? And you'd also find that at times it's not even the school that actually closes access to our learners. It's actually communities, because a lot of things come into play in terms of stigma. And the stigma does not only reside in the schooling environment, but outside of the schooling environment. Because remember, education is a societal issue. We even had incidences where the community was even saying that the Department of Education is promoting pregnancy. They are accommodating those learners in the schooling environment, but where are we supposed to send them? And how are we ending the scourge if we're not educating and actually improving the socio-economic background of our learners? Because through education, that's how they become the responsible citizens.
Is there psychosocial therapy, psychosocial help, not only for the child that's bringing into the world a baby, but for parents? Because that's where the support system ought to start for this child. Yes, this has now happened, but the reality is that we have an addition to the family, and we have to be supportive to this child so that she doesn't feel abandoned. Because we're going to talk a little later about the mental wellness issues for her, but who gives advice to parents? Because I think those are the people perhaps that do the most damage if they're not supportive.
That is very true. That is very true. That's why we find ourselves as a department in a corner, because we recently are talking about how we ensure parent-child communication, because even those that are educated, I'm talking now parents, are not talking to their children regarding sexual reproductive health issues. And in terms of the media, in terms of community, in terms of their friends, people are actually advising, and we're buying our children cell phones. So they have access to the internet, they're learning a lot. So as parents, how are we intervening in ensuring ensuring that we build trust between our children and interested in terms of what is happening in their lives, so that when the incidents of pregnancy occur or when they get into relationships, they are in a position to actually talk to us. And when they talk to us as parents, what is then our response? How are we responding to our... Because sometimes we're even closing that gap of communication. As a result, we keep on saying we're losing our children. The educators must talk to the children. But when the Department of Education is talking about sexual reproductive health information, you're saying, why are you taking our role as a parent? So there's a lot of work we need to do in terms of learner level, in terms of community level. By community level, that's when we bring about the parents, the role of the parents, and the role of society and our sister departments in ensuring that even if this child is becoming a teen mother, what support is then provided in order to actually take this child through issues of being a young parent.
Yeah. Dr. Omar, let's talk about the symptoms of mental health conditions of this young mother. What are the telltale signs that they are either coping with what has happened or perhaps not coping with it?
Very important, because often what we fail to see is the mental health of many of these young girls, many of these young children. Often they start withdrawing, isolating themselves, and show a lack of interest in activities that they previously enjoyed, lack of appetite, changes in their sleeping patterns where they're sleeping a lot or unable to sleep. And a lot of this contributes to underlying depression because the lack of coping skills, feeling hopeless, helpless, feeling trapped, and finding no way to exit this crisis that they're faced with. So these are some of the things. We also find that some of the young girls have also resorted to substance abuse, whether it's drugs and alcohol, and even other risky behaviors where they're self-mutilating, self-cutting, and they're just finding difficulty in coping with daily basic activities. So I think these are things that we have to caution families out there, because what my learned colleague from DBE highlighted was, and what you said, is it's very important to bring in the significant others, the caretakers, the caregivers, the biological parents, whoever they may be. Because in our therapeutic interventions, the way we work with groups is that we bring in the young girls that are affected directly by this crisis, and wherever possible to bring in their support structures in order for them to understand the challenges, the emotional trauma, the psychological trauma, the possible and probable mental health implications in the trajectory of this young girl. So working collectively, it's a holistic, integrated approach to helping the child who is giving birth to another child. And I think this is very important, that it's not a one-man show. We have to work collectively, as DBE spoke to earlier, that it's the role of government, yes, social development, education, health, NGOs, the civil society organizations, faith-based organizations, and we need to look at preventative strategies like your parenting programs, because communication is key. And how do you transfer important communication to prevent children from finding themselves in these risky circumstances?
Ms. Nokama, let's come back to you. A little earlier, you alluded to what we are now going to discuss, statutory rape. Because as you earlier said, how do you explain a 10-year-old that is pregnant? That person has no mental capacity to consent to having sexual intercourse with, needless to say, someone much older than them. How many of these cases do you see processed through the courts, cases of statutory rape?
That is a very difficult question, because in terms of the sector, we only monitor those that are actually happening in the sector. Because remember, in terms of learner pregnancy, we always say that where pregnancy occurs where a learner becomes pregnant, regardless of their age, we need to ensure that we fill Form 22 so that the Department of Social Development and SAPS can actually investigate these issues. And in the sector, we have actually gone to a point where if it's the official of the department, whether it's an educator, we actually report that to the South African Council of Educators so that and also the employee relations within our department to actually investigate the case and also suspend the educator when necessary. And we also have observed that in provinces like Gauteng, in 2021 and 2022, we had about 40 sexual misconduct cases that were reported in the sector. But as my colleague also said, this issue of teenage pregnancy is actually requiring us as government, even our sister departments and other departments, to actually respond and work in collaboration. So to answer your question, as a department, we are encouraging that all these cases be reported so that the perpetrators can be actually held into account.
In cases where it is found that it is the teacher who has impregnated a learner, do we have some kind of sexual predator registry?
Yes.
Apart from them being reported to the South African Council of Educators, is there that registry? And if we do, how quickly or how big is the list growing? Because this issue of teenage or child and teenage pregnancy, it's not stopping. If anything, it's growing larger and larger.
That is very true. And there is the sexual offence register, and it is actually getting longer and longer because of our policies, then these issues are being reported. And sometimes you get scared of statistics in terms of the reports, but that is what we want to see. We want to see that all the sexual offenders are part of that register so that when we start appointing teachers as education, we conduct a vetting process where we even check the register. So whoever is in that register, you're not going to find in our sector.
Dr. Omar, final words from you about how society and, I suppose more importantly, the parents who are possibly dealing with this right now, what is the advice to them?
Well, I think the most important thing is to actually support them, that there are organizations, there are mental health professionals, there is psychosocial support a call away. Importantly, that they need to seek counseling and support, and there is hope at the end of the tunnel. I think a lot of parents feel it's the end of the road. Yes, one understands the shock and the trauma of actually dealing with the child, birthing a child, but at the same time, one should never forget that it is a child and the child needs support. So, and it's not only the child that needs support, but that the family also needs support. So the important thing is for them to connect with professional organizations. And there are many NGOs that are providing support. Because they are an NGO, there is no cost or fee that is attached to that kind of psychosocial support, counseling, and also brokering on behalf of the child and the family, ensuring that there is an opportunity for grants, etc., but also negotiating with the educational institutions to ensure that there is additional support provided for extra tuition and concessions made to enable the child to complete certain assignments and modules at school. So the important thing here is to never give up. Hope is there. I think we need to also remember that. But I want to just labor on something. I know that the sex offender register is still not as it should be on track. There are many educators that are not on that sex offender register because educators are very astute and sophisticated in their modus operandi. The moment they realize they've been reported, they leave that school, they disappear, they go to another province and repeat and perpetuate that cycle of abuse. So it is something that we need to work together, put our heads together. I know Section 27 has been working with SACE and with Department of Education, and a lot more work still needs to happen in that arena. But just to reiterate, to parents out there, never to give up, never give up on your child.
Thank you so much for those encouraging words, Dr. Shaheda Omar. Final words from you, Ms. Nokama. That's a big concern, that sex offenders or sexual offenders will move from one school to the other. How is it that the department is unable to trace them?
The challenge is when we only report to SACE, our schools only report to SACE and the department's employee relations, and not include SAPS and the Department of Social Development. Because remember, if you are reported in SAPS or Department of Social Development, no matter where you move, your case will actually follow you. And I think you said it very well, Omar, when you said that we need to work together as the different departments, and we are actually strengthening that process of the sexual offense registers.
Busisa Nokama is the Basic Education Department's Learner Pregnancy Prevention and Management Deputy Director, and Dr. Shaheda Omar is with the Teddy Bear Clinic. Thank you both for your time on such an important discussion.